What's up, everyone? It's Bryan from the Exact IT and Cybersecurity YouTube channel. Welcome to another video. Today we're going to get into what is going on at the Federal Reserve. LockBit 2.0 claims that they have them held for ransom. They stole 33 terabytes of data. What does this mean for you? What does this mean for Americans? Why should we care? Why should the Federal Reserve even think about paying this money? Why does LockBit even think what they have is worth anything? Let's talk about it in today's video. Let's get into it. Welcome back to the channel. If you are a subscriber, if you're new, thank you. Hit that subscribe button. Like this video. Hit the notification bell if you want to be notified when we put out more videos that talk about hacks and cyber attacks and all those things. We appreciate the support. So the Federal Reserve here in the U.S. it's been claimed anyway by LockBit earlier this week on Monday, June 24, 2024, that they have now stolen 33 terabytes of juicy financial information of Americans, and they have now told the Federal Reserve they have until about 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time today, June 25th, to pay up. Now, this group, LockBit, has been around for a long time. They're one of the most notorious ransomware groups out there. And while this does not scream of ransomware, this is a newer trend when it comes to cybercrime, and that's just data exfiltration, data extortion. They used to call it double extortion. It was an attempt by cyber criminals to kind of ratchet up the pressure on companies to pay the ransom once files were encrypted. So once companies started putting in precautions like backups and things like that, and these ransomware groups started to see the success of their ransomware go down, they decided, well, let's steal the data before we encrypt it. That way, even if they have backups, we can just say, hey, you're going to pay us to not release this data. And that's known as double extortion. And then as time went on, we started to notice situations where these cyber criminals decided we don't even need to encrypt the data. We can just steal it. This data is so important that if we just have it and we threaten to release it or sell it to other cyber criminals on the dark web, we can make money that way. And there is definitely a market for that. There's definitely a market for cyber criminals going in and getting paid a ransom. There's also a market for these cyber criminals to go on the dark web and monetize this data in some other way by selling it to other cyber criminals, financial scammers. You think of it, you name it, there's probably a marketplace for it on the dark web, and guys out there trying to figure out how to make money off of that information. So we don't know where this is going to end up, and we don't even know if this is true, because there's a lot of people out there who are speculating that this LockBit 2.0 group, because they have so much law enforcement pressure on them, and as I mentioned at the top of the video, that this is one of the most notorious ransomware groups to date. They do have law enforcement's attention, and they have had some run-ins with law enforcement in the recent past. You can check out some of the videos that we have on the channel that talk about that. But at the end of the day, law enforcement is on this group's tail, and that leads a lot of security researchers to believe that this group is just boasting and they really don't have anything at all. So we will find out today just about when this video hits YouTube, is when the group's deadline has been imposed, and we'll see if there's any action by them or by the Fed to resolve this in some way, shape, or form. But you got to believe that the Fed has the full support of the U.S. authorities and justice system behind them. So just remember, if you think that LockBit's in trouble, whatever, I'd love to hear from you in the comments down below. What do you think is going to happen to LockBit now that they've gotten the attention of the federal government to this level? It'll be interesting to see what happens with this group here. I'd love to hear from you in the comments on what you think about LockBit. So who's LockBit? So I mentioned we have a video on LockBit on the channel, but just quickly, they're a group. They've been active since about 2019. They've targeted numerous organizations, usually demanding hefty ransoms one of the most prolific ransomware groups pretty much ever. And despite major international law enforcement operations earlier this year, which took down many of their servers and things like that, this group has reemerged and they've continued to their operations. So the leader, who is under a lot of law enforcement pressure, doesn't seem to be fazed by any of it, and his group is continuing to wreak havoc. And if this ends up being true with the Federal Reserve, you can definitely say this is a shot across the bow to a lot of high-level officials in the American government, if this is actually what we think it is. So why does this information matter that LockBit stole from the Fed, and why would someone even want to hold it for ransom? So the reason that it matters is that the data allegedly stolen by LockBit includes highly sensitive financial information about Americans, impacting not just the Federal Reserve, but all Americans and anyone who does business outside of the U.S. as well with Americans who uses U.S. dollars. Holding such data for ransom puts enormous pressure on the Fed, and the release of this information could lead to significant financial and personal privacy issues. Now, this has been a major concern for me for the last 6 months or so. I've been ringing the alarm on this channel and on my podcast, Security Squawk, which also has a YouTube channel, so please check that out. Appreciate your support there as well. But Americans across the board are having their information stolen and sold and traded on the dark web, and I don't think many Americans realize what is actually going on and the breadth and depth of what these criminals have these days. Just in the last month, we've had major hospitals, we've had major healthcare organizations, we've had payroll companies, we've had major financial institutions in the mortgage world and in the real estate world, all have ransomware attacks and all have their data stolen as a result. There are so many data points on Americans out there just in the last 6 months, in the first part of the 2024 year. It is mind-boggling, and unfortunately this is going to become a massive problem for a lot of Americans down the road. That is why this is such a big deal. And as I mentioned earlier, this is not ransomware. This is people stealing data from an organization and then deciding that that data is valuable enough that where that organization might not want it getting out there, so they extort these companies and these organizations with the idea that they won't release it. Now, who knows if that's even going to be the case, right? Because somebody else has this data. And that's the bigger problem that Americans need to be concerned with, is that someone else has this data. So you're now relying on the good word of a criminal to not release that data or sell it or do something else with it. The other problem is, the other issue, the other underlying thing that a lot of people don't understand that I do as a cybersecurity researcher and somebody who's analyzed thousands of cyber attacks, is that sometimes these ransomware groups, when they go down or when they go out of operation, things just get left around. Like, we see this in the corporate world. I think of major financial institutions in the financial world that we know of who didn't dispose of their servers properly and were fined and sanctioned by things like the SEC as a result. Well, things like that happen commonly with these cyber criminal groups, where they have these servers somewhere and the servers get shut down and they just leave this information on these devices to be found by whoever comes along and finds it and decides, hey, what's this? Let's plug it in. Let's see what's on it. And boom, now they have all these terabytes of data that were part of this stealing of or this event that happened against the Fed. These things do happen. Like, our law enforcement, our FBI, our CIA have gone into these areas of the world and infiltrated these groups and found these servers and old servers shut down and found information of companies and things like that on their devices well after these events. And that's the scary part. This information, 5, 10 years down the road could end up in the wrong people's hands as well. So is this cyber criminal group LockBit bluffing? Well, I have no idea, and I'm not on this channel here to speculate on that. This group has yet to bluff in anything that I've ever seen, so this would be a change in tactics for this group, for sure. But a lot of people think that this is kind of like their last hurrah. This is one more chance to keep their ransomware as a service name out there in front of the people that they want to keep it out there in front of other cyber criminals. I don't believe necessarily that that could be the case here, just because this group historically hasn't behaved like that. I don't think that they're grandstanding or they're standing up and saying that they have this and they really don't. It's going to be a significant change in their normal behavior pattern if it ends up being the case that they are just bluffing. But a lot of people think that they are bluffing. They are saying that they just have this out there and they really don't have this information. But in a few short days, we will know the answer. We will find out. A couple of things will happen. Either they will take that information down off their dark web leak site because the group is negotiating with the Fed and in good faith they take these types of things down, or they will continue to start to release tidbits of information to start proving the naysayers wrong that they really do have this information and they will do something with it. So what does this mean for Americans? As I mentioned earlier, Americans need to be aware of all their data that's being exposed because of the lack of a robust cybersecurity protections and programs in most organizations across the United States. It doesn't matter if you're a public business, a public entity, a publicly traded company, a private business. We analyze these companies all the time. I'm not shy about coming on this channel and saying it, that companies just are not doing enough. And companies and people want to come in the comment section down below. They want to say things. They're really quite ignorant, in my opinion, because you just don't understand what it takes to protect. And while it's not easy, it's not impossible. But people want to take the easy road. People want to take the easy road and they want the easy way out and they only want to do a couple things and then they think that they're doing a lot around cybersecurity. And as we've seen with some recent ransomware attacks that have happened, that is absolutely the case. Well, yeah, their companies might feel like they're doing something, but it's not enough. And not enough becomes evident when your whole entire company has to be shut down as a result of a ransomware attack or a cyber attack. So the reality of it is, Americans, is that your governments, your local governments, they're getting killed with ransomware and cyber attacks. Your schools, they're getting killed with ransomware and cyber attacks. Your hospitals, they're getting killed with ransomware and cyber attacks. Your federal government's getting killed with ransomware and cyber attacks. And these are the ones we usually hear about. But there's private businesses out the wazoo who are getting hit with cyber attacks, many whom you never hear about because they really don't have to tell anybody. They're not necessarily publicly facing, they're not a restaurant, they're not a big food chain where you walk in and you can't really get service. A lot of these accounting offices, law firms, engineering firms, they're getting hit as well, and all kinds of information is being exposed, whether you just work there as an employee or maybe something that you do as part of your job is sensitive information, like the drawing plans for buildings and things like that. All of this is falling in the hands of cyber criminals at a rate that many people should be alarmed about. So the reason I make these videos and the reason I come on this channel is to tell Americans that you need to start taking some personal responsibility around some of this stuff and understand that your information is going to be exposed. So make sure that you have your credit file locked at all times and you don't open it unless you're actively seeking credit. Number two is keep a monitor on things like your health insurance. Is it being used and abused by somebody else who isn't you? You need to look at a lot of different things. Make sure your credit report has monitoring turned on for things on the dark web, like does your cell phone number show up there? Things like that. This is all information that you should have so you know whether or not you can be exposed. What does it mean if your cell phone number is on the dark web? Well, it means you're probably going to get text messages and spam. And hackers use these to see if you're a person, to see if they have you. So don't ever reply to these things. Don't ever, send any kind of indication back to the person who sent you these random messages that you exist, because that's what they're looking for. All right, do I have a person on the other end here? If you don't exist, they assume it just went into like outer space and didn't go anywhere, right? So that's the idea here, is like the minute you respond, the minute you open up an email and respond to it, that's when these cyber criminals know they have someone, and then you start to see more messages and things like that. So you just got to start taking some personal responsibility around your privacy and what could be out there and how you can be taken advantage of as a result of all these companies who are getting hacked, because I can tell you this, it's going to be a while before companies get their hands around this to where it slows down and stops. So for the next 3 to 5 years, just expect companies to just have your information exposed through their lack of good cyber protections. And as these businesses get smarter, spend more money on this stuff, and shore up their cyber defenses, maybe things will get better and it'll be less of a concern. But I am here on this channel to say that you need to take this into your own personal hands, make it your responsibility to make sure that your own personal information is protected so you don't take advantage of, and more importantly, make sure your children are protected too, because schools and whatnot are getting hit left and right, and there's a plethora of information on our children out on the dark web as well, which is really scary. So just make sure you have some kind of monitoring on your children before they turn 18, and make sure that their credit isn't ruined by some cyber criminal. And things like their school records and stuff like that, if their school has been hacked, you really want to look into it and make sure that those things are getting cleaned up by a professional. So that's my advice. If you need any help with this stuff, there's links down below. I'll let you know if the Fed really got hacked in an updated video, but that's where we're at today. The Federal Reserve here in the US potentially hacked by LockBit 2.0. 33 terabytes of data being held for ransom. We'll see if anyone pays it. We'll see how serious this is. Stay tuned and stay safe out there.